In the summer of 1990, a Las Vegas nightclub became the scene of one of the most audacious cash robberies the city had ever witnessed. Within 12 minutes, thieves walked away with nearly $2 million in unmarked bills, leaving behind no fingerprints, no witnesses, and no trace of their identities. The case baffled investigators for decades, filed away among hundreds of other unsolved crimes in a city built on secrets and silence. But sometimes the past refuses to stay buried, and in 2018, a forgotten storage unit auction would crack open a mystery that had remained sealed for 28 years. The Palladium was more than just another Vegas strip club. Located on the outskirts of the main tourist corridor, it catered to high rollers and serious gamblers who preferred their entertainment away from the bright lights and crowded casinos. The establishment had built a reputation for discretion, luxury, and most importantly, cash transactions that rarely appeared on any official records. Owner Vincent Marcelli had operated the club since 1987, transforming it from a failing dive bar into one of the city's most exclusive adult entertainment venues. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. On the night of August 14, 1990, the Palladium was operating under standard protocol. The club typically held between $1 and $3 million in cash at any given time, money that flowed through private gambling rooms, VIP services, and off-the-books transactions that made Vegas what it was. Security was tight but not paranoid. 3 armed guards patrolled the premises, cameras covered the main entrances, and a sophisticated alarm system protected the building's most sensitive areas. What made the Palladium particularly vulnerable wasn't its security measures, but rather its business model. The club operated as a cash-only establishment for most of its premium services. High-stakes poker games, private entertainment packages, and exclusive memberships were all settled in untraceable bills. This created a perfect storm of opportunity for anyone with the right information and enough nerve to act on it. The robbery began at exactly 11:47 p.m. during the club's busiest hour when attention was divided among dozens of patrons and staff members. 4 individuals entered through separate entrances, each dressed to blend seamlessly with the clientele. They wore expensive suits, carried themselves with confidence, and displayed the kind of casual wealth that made them invisible in a place where money talked louder than questions. Security footage would later reveal that these weren't desperate criminals or street-level thugs. Their movements were calculated, their timing precise, and their knowledge of the building's layout suggested months of careful observation. They knew exactly where the cash was stored, which guards would be stationed where, and how long they had before the alarm system would trigger law enforcement response. The first sign of trouble came when patrons in the main lounge noticed that the music had stopped. The DJ booth sat empty, and the usual background chatter had been replaced by an uncomfortable silence that seemed to spread through the room like smoke. Staff members began moving with unusual urgency, but their actions appeared coordinated rather than panicked. In the VIP section, where the club's wealthiest clients conducted their most private business, 3 men approached the main cash storage area with practiced efficiency. They presented what appeared to be legitimate identification to the security personnel, claiming to represent an insurance company conducting a surprise audit. The documentation looked authentic, complete with official seals and emergency authorization codes that matched the club's internal protocols. What the guards didn't know was that those authorization codes had been obtained weeks earlier through a carefully orchestrated social engineering campaign. Phone calls to administrative staff, fake inspections, and planted documents had slowly gathered the exact information needed to bypass the club's security measures without triggering immediate suspicion. The 4th member of the team positioned himself near the club's main exit, maintaining visual contact with the parking area while monitoring radio communications between security personnel. He carried a small electronic device that could intercept and jam radio frequencies, ensuring that any calls for backup would be delayed or blocked entirely. Inside the storage area, the three men worked with mechanical precision. They ignored smaller denominations and loose cash, focusing exclusively on sealed bundles of hundreds and fifties that represented the club's largest transactions from the previous week. Each bundle was marked with colored bands indicating its source, whether from gambling wins, service payments, or other activities that the club preferred to keep off official records. The entire operation was designed to appear routine until the very last moment. Staff members who encountered the team were told that the audit was confidential and that normal operations should continue undisturbed. This created a buffer of time during which the robbery progressed without raising alarms or triggering emergency protocols. By midnight, the four men had loaded nearly $2 million in cash into reinforced briefcases and were preparing to exit through predetermined routes. They moved in pairs, leaving at 5-minute intervals to avoid drawing attention from security cameras or curious staff members. Their escape vehicles had been positioned in different areas of the parking complex, each providing access to separate highway routes leading out of the city. The robbery wasn't discovered until 12:23 a.m., when a routine security check revealed that the main cash storage area had been completely emptied. The discovery triggered immediate lockdown procedures, but by then the perpetrators had vanished into the Vegas night, leaving behind only questions and a crime scene that yielded virtually no physical evidence. Initial police response focused on the club's employees and regular clientele, operating under the assumption that the robbery required inside knowledge and assistance. Every staff member was questioned extensively, background checks were conducted, and financial records were scrutinized for any suspicious activity or unusual expenditures. Vincent Marcelli cooperated fully with the investigation, providing access to security footage, employee records, and detailed accounts of the club's operations. However, the nature of the business created complications for investigators. Many transactions were conducted in cash specifically to maintain privacy, and several high-profile clients refused to provide statements or acknowledge their presence at the club that night. The security footage revealed the perpetrators clearly, but provided no actionable leads. The men appeared to be professionals, their faces partially obscured by strategic positioning and lighting conditions. They wore no distinctive clothing, carried no identifiable accessories, and left behind no fingerprints or DNA evidence that could be traced through existing databases. Forensic analysis of the crime scene produced equally frustrating results. The storage area had been cleaned methodically, with no trace evidence remaining on surfaces, door handles, or security equipment. Even the documentation used to gain access had been removed, leaving investigators with no physical proof of how the deception had been executed. Within weeks, the investigation had reached a standstill. The stolen money had not surfaced in any known criminal networks. None of the usual suspects had displayed sudden wealth, and no credible tips had emerged from the substantial reward offered by the club's insurance company. The case was officially classified as an ongoing investigation, but resources were gradually shifted to more promising leads and active cases. The Palladium continued operating under enhanced security measures, but the robbery had shattered the sense of invulnerability that had made it attractive to high-stakes clients. Business declined steadily over the following years, and by 1995, the club had closed permanently. Its building eventually converted into a warehouse complex that bore no resemblance to its glamorous past. For nearly 3 decades, the case remained dormant in police files, occasionally reviewed by cold case detectives but never generating new leads or suspects. The stolen money seemed to have evaporated as completely as the men who had taken it, leaving behind only questions and theories that led nowhere. But in a city where fortunes change overnight and secrets have a way of surfacing when least expected, the past was about to collide with the present in the most unlikely of places. The discovery that would crack open the Palladium case came not through police work or forensic breakthroughs, but through the mundane process of abandoned property auctions. In March 2018, a storage facility in Henderson, Nevada, prepared to liquidate dozens of units whose rental fees had gone unpaid for over a year. Among them was Unit 247, registered under the name Cassandra Mills, a former dancer who had worked at various Las Vegas clubs throughout the 1990s. Mills had died in 2016 from complications related to diabetes, leaving behind no immediate family and few personal connections. Her belongings had remained untouched in the climate-controlled storage space for nearly 2 years, while the facility's management attempted to locate next of kin or settle outstanding debts. When those efforts failed, the contents were scheduled for public auction according to Nevada state law. The winning bidder was Derek Santos, a local entrepreneur who specialized in purchasing abandoned storage units and reselling their contents through online marketplaces. Santos had developed an eye for valuable items hidden among ordinary household goods, and Unit 247 appeared promising based on the brief glimpse allowed during the preview period. He spotted what looked like expensive jewelry, vintage clothing, and several sealed boxes that might contain collectibles or memorabilia. After securing the unit for $800, Santos began the methodical process of cataloging its contents. Most items matched his expectations: vintage dresses from high-end boutiques, costume jewelry that sparkled under fluorescent lights, and photograph albums documenting a life spent in Nevada's entertainment industry. Cassandra Mills had clearly moved through the city's nightclub scene during its peak years, her belongings reflecting both the glamour and transient nature of that lifestyle. But it was a shoebox hidden beneath a pile of old magazines that contained the first hint of something extraordinary. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper and secured with rubber bands, Santos found a collection of items that seemed oddly out of place among the typical memorabilia of a club dancer. There were business cards from security companies, handwritten notes with dates and times, and, most intriguingly, a series of Polaroid photographs showing the interior of what appeared to be an upscale nightclub. The photographs were dated August 1990, and several showed detailed views of a cash storage area with distinctive wall paneling and security equipment. One image captured what looked like a floor plan sketched on the back of a napkin, with arrows indicating entry points and numbered positions marked throughout the layout. Another showed a man in an expensive suit examining documents, his face partially visible in profile. Santos initially assumed the items were related to Mills's work in club security or management, but closer examination revealed details that didn't align with typical employee materials. The handwritten notes contained specific references to cash amounts, guard rotations, and what appeared to be surveillance schedules. One note, written in careful block letters, included the phrase, "Insurance Audit Cover Story, Tested and Confirmed Effective." Curiosity overcoming caution, Santos decided to research the club shown in the photographs. The distinctive interior design and layout eventually led him to archived newspaper articles about the Palladium nightclub and its spectacular 1990 robbery. The connection became undeniable when he compared the Polaroid images to crime scene photographs that had been released to media outlets during the original investigation. The realization that he might possess evidence related to an unsolved multi-million-dollar heist prompted Santos to contact the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. Detective Maria Vasquez, who had recently been assigned to the Cold Case Division, agreed to examine the materials and quickly recognized their potential significance. The photographs and documents represented the first tangible leads the investigation had generated in nearly 3 decades. Forensic analysis of the handwritten notes revealed multiple contributors, suggesting that Cassandra Mills had not been working alone, but was part of a larger network involved in planning or executing the robbery. The handwriting samples were compared against existing databases and employment records from various Las Vegas entertainment venues, but no immediate matches emerged. However, the level of detail captured in the notes indicated intimate knowledge of the Palladium's operations and security procedures. The Polaroid photographs proved even more valuable, providing visual evidence of premeditation and careful reconnaissance that had preceded the actual robbery. Several images showed the same individuals who had appeared on the club's security footage from August 14, 1990, but captured from different angles and in better lighting conditions. For the first time, investigators had clear views of faces that had remained partially obscured for nearly 30 years. One photograph in particular drew intensive analysis, showing a man examining what appeared to be architectural blueprints spread across a table. The blueprints matched the Palladium's floor plan with remarkable accuracy, including security camera positions and alarm system components that were not visible to casual observers. This suggested either inside access or extensive surveillance that had mapped the club's hidden infrastructure. The discovery also shed new light on Cassandra Mills herself, transforming her from an unknown figure into a central player in the robbery's planning phase. Employment records showed that she had worked at the Palladium sporadically between 1989 and 1990, but had left approximately 2 weeks before the heist occurred. Her departure had been attributed to a scheduling conflict with another club, but the timing now appeared far more significant. Further investigation into Mills' background revealed connections to several individuals with criminal records, including 2 men who had been questioned briefly during the original investigation but were never considered serious suspects. Phone records from 1990, retrieved from archived telecommunications data, showed frequent contact between Mills and these associates during the months preceding the robbery. The breakthrough came when facial recognition software, far more advanced than anything available in 1990, was applied to the clearest Polaroid photograph. The system identified one of the men as Robert Chen, a professional burglar who had operated throughout the southwestern United States during the 1980s and early 1990s. Chen had been arrested multiple times for sophisticated breaking and entering operations, but had never been connected to the Palladium case. Chen was located in Phoenix, Arizona, where he had been living under his real name and working as a locksmith since 1995. When approached by detectives in April 2018, he initially denied any knowledge of the robbery but became cooperative when presented with photographic evidence of his involvement. His confession would finally provide answers that had eluded investigators for 28 years, revealing a conspiracy that was both more complex and more personal than anyone had imagined. Chen's confession unfolded over 3 days of intensive questioning, revealing a criminal enterprise that had operated with clockwork precision and ruthless efficiency. The robbery hadn't been the work of opportunistic thieves, but rather the culmination of a year-long surveillance operation designed to target one of Las Vegas's most lucrative cash repositories. According to Chen, the plan had originated with Marcus Webb, a former casino security consultant who had been quietly mapping the city's underground economy since the late 1980s. Webb understood that traditional casinos were nearly impenetrable due to their sophisticated security measures and constant surveillance, but establishments like the Palladium operated in a gray area where large amounts of cash changed hands with minimal oversight. These venues represented perfect targets for someone with the right connections and technical expertise. The challenge wasn't accessing the money, but doing so without triggering the kind of investigation that would inevitably follow a violent or obvious theft. The solution came through Cassandra Mills, who had been recruited not as a willing accomplice but as an unwitting intelligence source. Webb had cultivated a romantic relationship with Mills over several months, presenting himself as a businessman interested in investing in Nevada's entertainment industry. She provided access to employee schedules, security protocols, and most importantly, the timing of cash movements that occurred behind the scenes at various clubs throughout the city. Mills believed she was helping Webb conduct legitimate market research for potential business ventures. She photographed layouts, documented procedures, and gathered information about high-value transactions without understanding how that intelligence would be used. The notes found in her storage unit contained details she had provided during casual conversations, information that Webb had carefully documented and later used to plan the robbery down to the smallest detail. The team Webb assembled consisted of 4 specialists, each selected for specific skills that would be essential to the operation's success. Chen handled physical security, using his expertise with locks and alarm systems to identify vulnerabilities in the Palladium's defenses. David Torres, a former insurance investigator, created the documentation and cover story that would allow the team to access restricted areas without raising suspicion. Anthony Russo provided transportation and logistics, ensuring that escape routes and backup plans were thoroughly tested and rehearsed. The 4th member was Webb himself, who coordinated the operation and maintained contact with Mills throughout the planning phase. His background in casino security gave him insights into how investigators would respond to different types of crimes, allowing him to design an approach that would minimize physical evidence and create maximum confusion for law enforcement. Preparation for the robbery took nearly 8 months, during which the team conducted multiple reconnaissance visits to the Palladium. They posed as potential investors, insurance representatives, and maintenance contractors, gradually building a comprehensive understanding of the club's operations and security measures. Each visit provided additional intelligence that refined their approach and eliminated potential obstacles. The insurance audit cover story proved particularly effective because it exploited the club's desire to maintain legitimacy in the eyes of regulatory authorities. Adult entertainment venues faced constant scrutiny from multiple agencies, and surprise audits were common enough that staff members wouldn't question properly documented inspections. Webb's experience in the industry allowed him to create convincing paperwork and authorization codes that passed initial verification. On the night of the robbery, each team member knew exactly where to position themselves and what role to play. Chen disabled backup alarm systems while Torres presented credentials to security personnel. Russo monitored communications and maintained escape route security, while Webb supervised the actual cash removal. The operation proceeded without deviation from their rehearsed plan, with contingencies in place for every foreseeable complication. The stolen money was divided immediately after the robbery, with each team member receiving approximately $400,000 in cash. They had agreed beforehand to avoid contact with each other for at least 5 years, understanding that law enforcement would be monitoring known associates and criminal networks for signs of sudden wealth or suspicious activity. Webb's share was invested in legitimate businesses throughout California and Arizona, slowly laundered through real estate transactions and corporate acquisitions that left no traceable connection to the original theft. Chen used his portion to relocate to Phoenix, where he established the locksmith business that provided steady income and perfect cover for his criminal background. Torres moved to Colorado and opened a private investigation firm, while Russo disappeared entirely, his current whereabouts unknown even to his former accomplices. The plan had included provisions for handling Cassandra Mills, who remained unaware of her role in the robbery until weeks after it occurred. When she began asking questions about Webb's sudden departure from Las Vegas, the team realized she represented a potential threat to their security. The decision to eliminate that threat was made collectively, but the execution fell to Webb alone. Mills' death was staged to appear accidental, the result of a drug overdose that seemed consistent with the lifestyle associated with her profession. The coroner's investigation found no evidence of foul play, and her passing generated little attention beyond a brief obituary in the local newspaper. Her belongings were placed in storage by the club where she had been working, with rental fees paid through an account Webb had established for that purpose. For nearly 3 decades, the arrangement worked perfectly. The storage fees continued to be paid automatically, ensuring that the evidence Mills had unknowingly gathered would remain hidden indefinitely. Webb monitored the account periodically to ensure payments were processed, but never visited the facility or made direct contact with its management. The system failed only when Webb himself died in 2014 following a heart attack at his home in Sedona, Arizona. The automatic payments continued for 2 more years until the bank account was frozen during probate proceedings. With no surviving family members aware of the storage unit's existence, the fees went unpaid, and the contents were eventually scheduled for auction according to standard procedures. Chen's confession provided investigators with enough information to locate Torres in Denver, where he had built a successful private investigation business specializing in insurance fraud cases. When confronted with photographic evidence and Chen's testimony, Torres agreed to cooperate fully with the investigation in exchange for consideration during sentencing. His account corroborated Chen's version of events and provided additional details about the money laundering operation that had followed the robbery. The search for Anthony Russo proved more challenging, as he had effectively vanished after receiving his share of the stolen cash. Financial records suggested he had traveled extensively throughout South America during the early 1990s, but his trail went cold somewhere in Brazil around 1995. Interpol was notified, but after nearly 25 years, the likelihood of locating him remained slim. The recovery of the actual stolen money presented an even greater challenge for investigators. Webb's business investments had been legitimized through decades of normal commercial activity, making it nearly impossible to identify specific assets that could be traced to the original theft. Chen had spent most of his share on living expenses and business operations, leaving little that could be recovered. Torres had invested more conservatively, but his assets were similarly integrated into legitimate financial structures. Legal proceedings against Chen and Torres moved forward despite the passage of time, with both men ultimately pleading guilty to charges related to the robbery. The statute of limitations had expired for many potential charges, but federal prosecutors were able to pursue money laundering and conspiracy charges that remained viable. Chen received a sentence of 12 years in federal prison, while Torres was sentenced to 8 years based on his cooperation with the ongoing investigation. The case officially closed in December 2018, nearly 29 years after the original crime had been committed. The Palladium robbery was reclassified as solved, though the recovery of stolen assets remained minimal, and one suspect remained at large. The investigation had cost hundreds of thousands of dollars and involved multiple agencies, but it provided closure for insurance companies and law enforcement officials who had never forgotten the audacious heist that had embarrassed Las Vegas's security establishment. For Derek Santos, the man whose curiosity had triggered the case's resolution, the outcome brought both satisfaction and disappointment. He received a modest reward from the insurance company, but the bulk of Cassandra Mills' belongings proved to have little commercial value beyond their historical significance. The photographs and documents that had cracked the case were retained as evidence, leaving him with costume jewelry and vintage clothing that barely covered his initial investment in the storage unit. The story of the Palladium robbery became a cautionary tale within law enforcement circles, demonstrating how criminal enterprises could succeed through patience, planning, and the exploitation of human psychology rather than violence or intimidation. It also highlighted the importance of preserving evidence and maintaining cold case investigations, as technological advances and unexpected discoveries could breathe new life into seemingly hopeless cases. The resolution of the Palladium case sent ripples throughout Las Vegas's law enforcement community, but it also raised uncomfortable questions about how many other unsolved crimes might be sitting in storage units forgotten attics, and abandoned properties throughout the city. Detective Maria Vasquez found herself fielding calls from cold case divisions across the country, all wanting to know how a routine storage auction had accomplished what decades of investigation had failed to achieve. The answer wasn't particularly satisfying to career investigators who had spent years chasing leads and analyzing evidence. Sometimes the breakthrough came not from brilliant detective work or cutting-edge forensics, but from pure chance combined with one person's willingness to ask the right questions. Derek Santos had possessed no special training or investigative experience. He had simply recognized that something didn't belong, and had the curiosity to pursue it further. What made the discovery even more remarkable was how close it had come to never happening at all. The storage facility's records showed that Cassandra Mills' unit had been scheduled for auction twice before, only to have the proceedings canceled at the last minute when automatic payments resumed. Webb had apparently maintained multiple backup payment systems to ensure the evidence remained buried, but his sudden death had created a gap that no contingency plan could address. The facility's manager later revealed that Unit 247 had attracted minimal interest during previous auction previews. Most buyers focused on units containing obvious valuables like furniture, electronics, or tools that could be quickly resold. A dancer's personal belongings suggested little commercial potential, especially items from the early 1990s that had been sitting untouched for decades. Santos had been one of only 3 bidders, and his winning bid of $800 barely covered the outstanding storage fees. Inside the law enforcement community, the case became a teaching example of how criminal investigations could be influenced by factors completely outside investigators' control. The original detectives had conducted thorough interviews, analyzed physical evidence, and pursued every reasonable lead available to them in 1990. Their failure to solve the case hadn't resulted from incompetence or lack of effort, but from the simple fact that the key evidence had been deliberately hidden and remained inaccessible for nearly 3 decades. Modern forensic techniques had certainly played a role in the case's resolution, particularly facial recognition software that could identify suspects from decades-old photographs. But the technology would have been useless without the photographs themselves, which existed only because Cassandra Mills had documented activities she didn't understand were criminal. Her unwitting intelligence gathering had created a time capsule that preserved evidence in a format that could eventually be analyzed and understood. The psychological profile of the robbery team also evolved as investigators gained deeper insights into their methods and motivations. Marcus Webb emerged as a sophisticated criminal mastermind who had studied law enforcement procedures and designed his operation to exploit specific weaknesses in the system. His use of Mills as an unwitting intelligence source demonstrated a level of manipulation and long-term planning that elevated the crime far beyond a simple theft. Webb's background in casino security had provided him with intimate knowledge of how investigations would unfold following a major robbery. He understood that detectives would focus immediately on current and former employees, known criminals with relevant experience, and anyone who had displayed sudden wealth in the aftermath of the crime. His team had been selected specifically to avoid these obvious investigative pathways. The insurance audit cover story represented perhaps the most innovative aspect of the entire operation. Rather than attempting to bypass security measures through force or stealth, Webb had created a scenario where security personnel would voluntarily provide access to restricted areas. The psychological principle was simple but effective. People were conditioned to cooperate with authority figures who presented proper documentation and displayed confident professional behavior. Torres's role in developing the fraudulent documentation had been crucial to the operation's success. His experience as a legitimate insurance investigator allowed him to create materials that would pass initial scrutiny from security guards who weren't trained to detect sophisticated forgeries. The authorization codes he had obtained through social engineering matched the club's internal protocols exactly. eliminating any reason for staff members to question the audit team's legitimacy. The robbery's execution had been designed to create maximum confusion during the critical minutes when law enforcement response was being coordinated. By the time security personnel realized they had been deceived, the perpetrators had already completed their primary objective and were implementing escape procedures that had been rehearsed extensively. The 5-minute intervals between team members' departures ensured that no single witness could provide a complete account of the operation. 28 years after 4 men vanished into the Vegas night with nearly $2 million, a forgotten storage unit finally gave up its secrets. What began as an $800 gamble on forgotten belongings became the key that unlocked one of the city's most audacious, unsolved crimes. Sometimes the truth doesn't emerge from brilliant detective work or cutting-edge technology, but from pure chance, and one person's willingness to ask the right questions when something doesn't belong.